years ago to
I
do a show.
Can't take credit for inventing anything, but I certainly did lean on standard broadcast tools to do what we do. And I did always avoid ISDN lines and things like that are more expensive. We for years, what we've been doing is Richard's been calling into a phone line, and I've been calling the guest on a phone line or on Skype. And then he records his microphone. I record my microphone. We put all those things together. We line it up to the phone track, and then we mute the phone track. You know, it's like simple, low tech kind of stuff. We've been doing that since 2002. And then Skype got more reliable, and then we just started using Skype instead of the phone. Yeah.
And then Skype fell off. Like I ran into issues where folks didn't know what Skype was. Or they said, I don't think I've started that in a couple of years. I don't know how big the patch is going to be.
And then, trying to find the default microphone on a Mac, like, God, forget that.
Those battles back in the day.
We had to coach people through that. And then I also remember Skype had some serious bonking, which was one of the funniest ones was, I'm here to tell you that the most important thing that I've learned in my 20 years of development is... And we just laugh. Because
Skype has a sense of humor.
Skype has a sense of humor. It was like perfectly timed. And then, of course, we get remember Vonage? We made a joke about Vonage. We were saying, hey, do you speak Vonage? That's what Vonage sounded like in the early days. So anyway, we actually did test out a Zencastr in the early days, but we lost shows with it, right? It wasn't quite ready, or maybe the browsers weren't quite ready or whatever. But now they're embracing standards of H.264 and just great video and audio, and we haven't lost anything. We've been using it now.
Yeah, I think it's all those things together. The newer browsers, people with more bandwidth, software's gotten better, and it's now the easiest way for us to make a show.
And so we would encourage anybody who's doing any kind of, multi-location recording to use Zencastr.
Awesome.
So that's what we got.
Good one, man.
Yeah,
I like it.
Who's talking to us today, Richard?
We don't talk about startups all that often on the show, once in a while. And I was digging around a few different shows, but actually I want to read a comment off of one of the last shows we did, the one we did with Paul Stovall.
Oh, right.
Which I titled When Investors Come Calling. Because of course, part of that story was that Octopus Deploy, which has been a very much bootstrapped company all these years with Paul's work, is recently taking investment from Insight Partners, which is cool, and congratulations and so forth. And the comment on the show comes from Rikusent. I don't know if that's a pseudonym or whatever, but there's the name.
Canadian pronunciation.
Yeah, okay. That happens.
With
an extra E, maybe some Putin. And he says, I'm a bit disappointed that this episode missed out on the perspective of the employees in this process, considering most developers listening are employees. As it happens, my employer was acquired last month, and then the acquiring company was acquired by a private equity giant, and I think that it sucks. We've gone from being a modest independent company of about 100 employees to a blip that doesn't even get mentioned in the town hall calls. I was really proud to work for the founders, growing a relatively young business as best we could and serving our clients on their behalf, and with the prospect that one day I could earn some equity in the business. Now, meh. I found a new job at a large corporation I actually like the look of, and I'm going to quit today.
Wow.
None of this means that it was a bad decision to sell the business, or that the acquisition won't turn out for the best, so that the company won't grow as a business until a new parent. It just means that the kick I get out of working for my employer has been deflated, so I'm going elsewhere. Now, I appreciate the comment, and certainly that's an issue, but Octopus Deploy did not get acquired, right? Like, that's not what the show was about.
It's true, yeah.
They got an investment to grow. There's no acquisition going on at all. We did talk about the employees' experience. One of the funny things I don't think we mentioned on the show, but one of the reasons we did that episode with Paul is that his employees asked him, hey, are you going to talk about this on .NET Rocks?
Right, yeah.
And he was coming. He came to us saying, "Hey, we've done this thing. Does this make sense for a show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think that's an interesting story. Why don't we make a show around?"
But the funniest thing from that show, the funniest moment was when we asked him, "So what are you going to do with the money?" He goes, "I don't know." Like, we don't really need it. I'm like, what? They didn't need it to grow. They're growing with their own profits.
Well, he really got into accelerating growth and taking advantage of those opportunities. Yeah, Octopus Deploy has been a self-started company all along.
Yeah.
But there's a point where you're going to jump over these big thresholds, and that's what that money seems to be.
Yeah. It wasn't like they needed to make payroll or anything.
No, they're not trying to stay afloat or anything. They're doing just fine.
Yep.
So, I mean, I appreciate Brucasent's perspective on this, that he's empowered enough to, when his company completely changed, he went and changed his company. Like, he went somewhere else, and that totally makes sense.
Yep.
That's not what's happening with Octopus Deploy.
Right. But it is a good point.
And it's certainly, for me, who sat in both those seats, both as an acquirer and being acquired, it's very challenging as a leader to maintain a culture.
Yeah.
To be the entity you want to be. You work really hard to make something work a particular way. People work in that environment because that thing is important to them. And it's hard when you have, especially what he described, that rapid fire, there's an acquisition and another acquisition. Like, that's a culture smasher, man. That's tough.
Yeah.
So that does definitely happen. So Brucasent, thank you so much for your comment. It certainly stimulates some conversation here. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebook. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and we read on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
And follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. And send us a tweet, but remember to mute your microphone first. Yeah. And with that,
edit point.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Emily, can you mute your mic, please? We can also hear that you use a cup and a saucer, so you're a very civilized human. I appreciate that.
Oh, we're hearing something like that. All right, just unmute it if you want to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that, let us introduce our esteemed guest today. Jason Williamson is Vice President and Global Head of Oracle for Startups and Oracle for Research, which is Oracle's programs for startups, innovators, and researchers worldwide. Prior to Oracle, Jason was at Amazon Web Services, where he created and led several key initiatives within the investment and startup community. He has a background in both Fortune 500 firms and the startup world. An entrepreneur and professor, he co-founded the construction industry's first CRM SaaS offering, is currently launching a company in the pediatric healthcare space, and has also served as an assistant professor at the University of Virginia's McIntire School of Commerce. Welcome to .NET Rocks, Jason.
It is great to be here with both of you. I'm excited to talk with you. I hear you. It's cool to be in the room.
It is cool to be in the room of Zencastr.
Yeah, the virtual room.
The virtual room.
Oh, I wanted people to think like, oh man, they got together. How did they do that?
It's so much better than Zoom because everybody gets recorded on a separate track, and that's so much better.
That's the funny truth. It's a strong advantage for us to actually be a part in terms of making a quality recording.
Right. Well, Jason, the first thing I want to say is I don't really know what we're going to talk about here. I don't know much about. I haven't been following what you're doing, but when I hear the words Oracle and startup in the same sentence, I think,
yeah. What are you talking about? My brain
goes, what?
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing?
Yeah. Right.
I thought you guys were a database company. I'm confused. Right.
Throw some Java in there and there you go. Right.
Yeah.
No, and that is a common reaction. And we've really been at it, not for very long. So, it's fair to say that we've been looking after this space for not long enough. And the story is actually quite a cool one, right? As Oracle's cloud infrastructure really started to take off a few years ago, and we observed what our enterprise customers were doing with it, what they were being, threatened with, you see, man, it's emerging technology. It's coming from startups. Well, we should be paying attention to those. In fact, one could argue, Larry Ellison's like the OG founder, right? So we really are getting back to our roots. So about 4 or 5 years ago is when we launched the startup program, which actually doesn't look like the way it does today. It was a very traditional accelerator where you had lots and lots of people apply for just a handful of seats, and then you came down for 6 months to a city, and then you learned about things and you went on your way. And then about 2.5 years ago, we really had this realization that said, wow, startups do care about Oracle. So we had 6,000-7,000 applications for 80 seats. What can we do to open this up so more people can get engaged? And so yes. So I guess the answer to your question is, yeah, we do care about startups, and though we're late to the game, and we love working with them. It's fantastic.
Wow. But I mean, you hit that interesting problem. There's too much interest. Accelerators are hard to scale.
Yes,
because it's the mentorship, that sort of direct touch.
Correct.
So have you've gone more programmatic? It's like, okay, you're a startup. Here's what you need to know.
Yes, it's fact. I like to kind of call it like mass customization. And so what we learned from the first iteration was startups care about Oracle. And what we learned was that startups care about Oracle because we have an opportunity to provide access to customer base that they can't easily get to. So it's 40 years of enterprise sales with 430,000 customers building B2B applications and selling stuff. Say what you want about Oracle, right? Like, we had to build stuff and sell it to companies and do it for a really, really large time.
Right.
So startups are like, wow, I'm building an application in the HCM space. I'm building an application in, agriculture, healthcare. I'm going to bump up on an Oracle application. It makes sense for me to understand what that looks like. And so for us, it was like, well, yeah, we really should be working with you. And so that's what our unfair advantage is. Like, as the cloud becomes more ubiquitous, one could argue that it's a commodity and it's just like a price war. So like, I can spin up something here or here or here. If I'm a startup at the very, very beginning, I want to be able to spin it up and it work and it not be expensive or almost free. All right, once I get past that, now who's going to give me a valuable relationship? And that's where we started to hit that stride. So in fact, it was a funny conversation with Larry about the program when we were in that residential model. And he was like, how many startups, because we were vetting them very heavily, right? Thousands of them to a few. It was like, hey, how many of these startups you're heavily vetting can you predict will be successful? And it was like one of those questions that, like, well, of course I have no idea. He was like, exactly. Well, let them all in. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And then once they,
it's a really good business approach to helping startups. I mean, when you're in sort of a commodity business, just like as you said, you always have to ask yourself, what am I bringing to the table? What are we bringing to the table to our customers that other customers can't replicate? And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people are trying to get into the social media personality space, because they're building a brand around themselves that can't be duplicated, and you guys, what you have, your customer list, man, that's gold.
Yeah. Right. It's a unique asset, but it also means there are particular kinds of startups that will really, that's super valuable. Like the B2B startup utilizing cloud, like jumping in this new business model that others are still fighting to transform to, has a distinct advantage then.
Correct. So I think there's a couple, and it 100% started out that way. That is still true. Now that we've gotten better with our cloud and more even ubiquitous with our partnerships, where people can put, which is really, really cool, like multi-cloud stuff. Like we've got interconnects with Azure. So you have like 1.5 millisecond lag time between our data center and Microsoft. So some people are running Microsoft workloads or workloads at Microsoft and then connective tissue into Oracle. So like, hey, we can talk about that a little bit later, but this notion of multi-cloud is really, really cool. So like, as we continue to build better developer tools and more data centers, and it's just like, okay, you don't only have to look at, AWS, Google, and Microsoft. Now, like, Oracle's a thing. We're starting to see more and more startups that aren't B2B come in because they want to take advantage of like HPC and GPU processing. But the original draw, which is still true and only better, is exactly what you just said. It's like B2B players that need enterprise class stuff, lots of compute, obviously lots of data. That's why we still do that. So That's been and then for us, it's like a virtuous cycle, to steal a term from Amazon. If we can really invest in these startups and make it easy and cheap or free, and get them access to our customers, and our customers are buying cool stuff from a startup that is complementary to what Oracle builds, then they buy more stuff from the startup grows, buys more stuff from us. Like, it's just virtuous. And then we become a good partner to all people, So
I don't want to skip over the multi-cloud thing that you guys are offering.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit in an advertisement, but tell everybody exactly what that means and how that's different from just going to AWS, Azure, Google Cloud.
Sure. So yeah, right. I mean, you can, and I would argue maybe should, that wouldn't put me in the penalty box to say that. I think you should think about multi-cloud strategies. Not every platform provider is going to probably say that. I'm a fan in not having vendor lock-in. And so, like, the farther up you go in a stack, like just pick AWS or something, there's some like really cool features in there, right? Like really neat services. Same with Google, same with us. The farther up you go there, the harder it is to leave. It just is, right? And so when it comes down to it, a bunch of what you do is just good old compute. You're throwing up a Windows instance or a Linux instance, like it's that. And then, whether you're going to deploy your Kubernetes or you want to use, whatever. So obviously companies, it's not just startups. Like, we're talking about issues that really matter to companies. It just so happens that startups can do this now cheaply, which is like, you could build your own like multi-cloud strategy, right? So like, okay, now when Oracle's seeing that, like, okay, who makes a lot of sense for us to partner with so that we can provide the best service for our customers. And that's why the Azure Interconnect made the most sense. So I'm a fan of multi-cloud. I think it's a good thing.
What is Azure Interconnect?
So it lets Oracle and Azure put workloads in the cloud, and there's a direct link between the Azure data center and the Oracle data center. And so think about that pipe that goes there, and then that allows you to direct connect. Like, you could run, say, an Oracle managed database on the Oracle Cloud and a .NET application set in Azure, and it's very, very like 1.5 millisecond, super low latency. And so from a deployment perspective, from a pricing perspective, it's easy to do. And so that was what the hopes were with that partnership there. So it started with enterprises. Like, obviously enterprise, that's where a lot of stuff with Microsoft and Oracle start. It's like, enterprise, we want to sell to really big companies. What do they need? They don't want to go all in on one particular place for a lot of reasons. So like, all right, let's make it easy for you not to go all in on one place, and you can go multi-in with us. And so now we're seeing that is good for our startups. So we have a couple companies that are doing that, where certain workloads run really inexpensively on our stack versus another, and they can do both of those at the same time.
Yeah, I was thinking through like what that is. Like, well, a lot of folks talk about multi-cloud from a redundancy perspective. There are occasional outages. I want to run somewhere else.
This is not bursty stuff, right?
Yeah, because the cloud's supposed to be able to support bursts. I always want to be tolerant to outages. That's one angle, and I question that, because let's face it, cloud is far more reliable than on-prem for virtually everybody. So it's not that good an excuse. But I appreciate what you're talking about, which is, hey, certain kinds of workloads are more cost-effective on different platforms. Right. Or may even have resource availability. Like, I remember a couple of years ago when AI was hitting hard, and like every GPU available in the cloud got consumed, at one point. And I think it was only Amazon had some left because they jacked up the price 100-fold.
Right.
And even those guys are blinking. It's like, I'm not paying $100 an hour, a minute for this stuff.
Right.
But the idea that you could have an architecture that's tolerant to, I have an exotic load, let's go shop that load.
Right.
Like, let's try it in different locations.
And what you're getting is, I mean, you're talking about like a layer 2 isolation, network isolation between the two data centers. with in the extended network. So you're looking at a virtual cloud network that is the same, but at two different platforms, different vendors. So typically when one sees this, it is on-prem to the provider, right? And so you have the same network space, you have all that. But this is between two different providers. And so you're exactly right. So you can whether you want redundancy.
So what's the authentication strategy between those two connections? Like, well, how are we making that? You said layer 2, so it's like literally at the IP level?
Correct. And you have, like we have, and we do the handshake with our virtual private cloud in between. And so that's how that's happening.
So it's effectively a VPN connection on each end.
Correct. Over a direct connect.
It's something that IT sets up. The software needs to know nothing.
Correct.
It's just a different address.
Yeah, right. Which is cool too. And so, that's what we're seeing. And it's a cool thing for startups then who are saying, okay, I want to be kind of enterprise ready, and I want to be when I grow up, I want to be able to grow up into something that's going to handle, all these things that they should expect. So, but yeah, going back to your original thought, you're exactly right. Like it's the B2B players that it's a natural motion for them, because we have on our team, and this is another thing that I think we're trying to be uniquely different and better, which is a phrase we like to use around here, and is delivering on that promise of trying to make these sales opportunities accessible, right? So this isn't like an ISV program where you like sign up and like get in on the list of 9,000 people, right? Like we have a team here of human people whose job it is to help those startups navigate the Oracle machine. And so whether that's bringing them to events when we used to have them on stage to,
remember events? Events are fun.
Those were really cool when we could do that too.
That was awesome.
When, if we get an article in the paper or something like that, all the way up to like sales calls and planning. That's just such a great joy for me, is to see a startup get into a enterprise level customer and close a deal because we were able to enable that. The revenue's not huge for us, but it's life-changing for them. And so, that's the other part of the whole Larry question. Like, why don't you let them all in? Who cares if they fail? We want them to fail with a good experience, because, startup people don't be like, oh, shucks, that didn't work, I'm never going to try that again. They like build more stuff. And so,
it's the next idea and the next idea. And it's a culture thing too, of this entrepreneurialism of keep on experimenting and learning from each iteration, pivot one more time.
So you're enabling the ADD of developers everywhere.
Exactly. Squirrel. As you've heard in my answers, like I've answered like 9 questions you didn't even ask. But but you're exactly right. Like we appreciate that startup people are thinking of lots of different things. So our value to them isn't just like, here's credits. Like, yeah, we got to do that, but like, here's credits, here's mentorship, here's access. But it's joint responsibility, right? Like, you have to do certain things to unlock certain goodies. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to the folks that are going to be the most successful within the ecosystem, right? So if you're a startup with like 2 people and you just got your MPV, doesn't make sense for me to bring you into the CIO of, Acme Telecom, right? Yeah. But you can, but we love those.
They also sell anvils and TNT.
and stick on cave wall doors. Yeah, okay.
Oh my goodness, that's so good.
Hey, while we're laughing here, let's just hold on for 2 minutes while we take a moment for this important message.
This is an edit point. We forgot to ask them if they had any offers for our listeners, and it turns out they do. Use promo code NETROCKS to join Oracle for Startups and receive $2,500 in free cloud credits. That's NETROCKS, NETROCKS.
All right, we're back. It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's Rich Campbell. That's Jason Williamson. We're talking startups with Oracle. Yeah, I know. Who knew? But apparently there's really good reasons for partnering with Oracle if you're a startup. And we were just in the middle of something, and you talked about you didn't want to take somebody into Acme anvils and paint on walls if they weren't ready for it. I forgot exactly what you were trying to say, but
yeah. So two things. One, we want to help them along their maturity model and maturity path. Like we don't want to like put them in a situation where it's going to be horrible because we would look bad too, right? But we also want to make it a happy place for super, super early stage pre-seed people, right? Yeah. If people are asked like, what startups or what stage should you be thinking about Oracle? I'm like, rolling out of your dorm room bed to like a Series A-ish, B-ish. That's kind of the space that we work in. So if you're like really, really new and you're in college and you've got like a capstone project, like, and you're trying to do a pitch competition, like, yeah, build your stuff here. We'll help you. Like we love college people. In fact, I'm working. We do a lot of. We're a startup within Oracle. Like we get a lot of stuff wrong. We try to fix it and then move on and do new things. And one of those new things we're doing this year is I'm excited about is what I think is maybe a creative internship program. You knew that, or you read earlier that I spent time at university, and so I have a huge affinity for students. And so we're doing an internship this summer where students will come and work for Oracle, that's not unusual. We do that all the time. But they'll do a rotation through our team, but then they'll also do a rotation through one of our startups. And so we'll say to a startup like, hey, do you want somebody who's really good at Oracle that you don't have to pay for, and you get them for like DevOps or machine learning or standing up your Kubernetes on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, OCI is what we call it. So, so we're always trying to figure out ways to like be value add to our startups. And so that's why I said mass customization at the beginning. Like we're not just doing a couple hundred startups, we're doing thousands. But we have like this menu of goodies that they can pick and choose from, and their level of engagement with us just depends on where they are in the maturity model, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Is the term keiretsu appropriate? The Japanese concept of you're building up this interlocking set of companies?
It's interesting that you say that because I've thought too, like, man, we're building. It's almost like a private equity firm kind of thing where you've got opportunities for startups to even serve each other, and we're seeing that happen. That wasn't our intention.
Yeah, but it's sort of an emergent force, right? That ultimately this is where it can end up.
Totally. And I see that as a possibility. I don't think that was our intent. It's not a stated goal, but it's definitely an emerging theme. Yeah.
So this looks like a combination of things then. I mean, you mentioned sort of casually the credits part,
yes,
which is sort of the normal offering for cloud providers for startups is like, hey, let me give you a discount so you get hooked in my platform. And when you start making money, then, you can start paying us.
Right. And so the way it works,
that's fundamentally true.
That's exactly true. So it's true-ish. So the way it works is a startup comes, there's no like you sign up, you're in, right? And you immediately get a bucket of credits to just like go do stuff. So it starts with 500.
And there's no strings attached. No. There's no like, if you get to this level, we're going to own 5% or 10% of your company. There's none of that.
No. Yeah. So we take zero equity. We take zero equity. We live in engineering. I think we're the only program that's not like in some sort of business development, salesy function. And that's important because, as a Oracle person, I'm measured on like success. And so like my success thing isn't like, how much money did you get out of these startups? It's like, how well did we serve them? And the way that we measure how well we serve them is like, how many workloads are they running? I don't care if it's $1 a month or $100,000 a month. I mean, I like those. But I care about like, are you putting your workloads here? Are you logging into the console? Are you are you engaging with us? That's how we measure our success. And so they come in, they get a bucket of credits. If they need more, they ask. And so that's basically how it works. If they retire those credits within 2 years, and there's a couple of ways they can say like, hey, I need 25,000. Like, okay, here's the path to that, or whatever. If they retire those credits within 2 years, we have them on an extremely we have 70% discount on whatever it is they consume for 2 years, no questions asked, don't need to get approval, don't need to talk to a sales guy. That's it. Wow. And that's actually quite compelling because the way it really is, because a lot of startups, as you notice, when you get more mature, you start using more stuff. You start going up the stack. When you go up the stack, you spend more money.
And you may or may not have customers yet, right?
Correct. And
probably not. And you've got to be able to absorb that. And what if you need to migrate? That's another benefit we do. If you want to, we're not first to this game. We get that everyone is somewhere else. Right.
And so migration for us is table stakes. So if somebody needs to migrate an application over, we'll do it for free. So I've got an engineering team, and that's what they do.
Wow.
So they will do hands-on keyboard if need be, or just like guided tour if need be. And so that's a really great benefit.
You basically watch and see who's got a really good idea, who's got good implementation and architecture, and you find something that you like, and that's when it's like, okay, now what do we do? Do we go talk to investors? Do we go talk to customers?
I got to start my masterminds.
Exactly. And yes is both
and I
of those
imagine
questions.
that you